right, everybody, this is T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we are going to finish our discussion on the 7 heavenly virtues and talk a little bit about how you might incorporate these concepts we've presented, both in our discussions on the 7 deadly sins and the 7 heavenly virtues, into the kind of work that you're doing as a coach or a consultant. So we'll try our very best to pull this all together into a nice little practical package. So last time around, we talked a lot about patience, and you guys will have to revisit that recording to kind of see what we meant by charity, diligence, and patience, and where they occur on the change grid and how they might change based on where you happen to land on the change grid. But pretty much we're left with the final two, that's kindness and humility. So let me put up a little diagram for you, just to get you all back into the swing of things. Let's bring up a composite change grid. You guys should be able to see all the different layers when I do this. And so just to rewind a little bit, where do you think on the change grid you are likely to encounter impatience? And how does that impatience express itself, depending on where you choose? So where on the change grid do we find impatience?
I would say, oh, I was just going to say power stress.
Power stress. Now that's good. Tell us why you think power stress will start to feel a little bit of impatience.
Yeah, well, I know what I want, but I'm frustrated. We're not there yet. What's going on?
That's right. And remember that power stress carries within it a sense of what do I say? There's kind of like an impulsiveness. There's a sense of urgency, and the moment you start talking about urgency, then impatience is going to come along with the mix. And certainly, what do you think happens as we move from power stress even up into stress? What do you think happens to that level of impatience?
It's worse.
It gets frantic.
Yeah, it gets more and more frantic, more and more desperate. So the person who's up in the upgrade danger zone, forget being impatient. They're desperately hoping that someone can do something to try to get them out of whatever predicament they happen to be in. So we definitely find upgrade impatience. And as Peter pointed out, it's because we're frustrated. We don't have what we need in order to get what we want, but we really want it. Or in the case of being up in the upgrade danger zone, we desperately need it. We could be even in a life-threatening sort of a situation. So I think it's pretty easy to see and understand the kind of impatience we might feel when we're very far upgrid. Where else on the change grid do you think you might encounter impatience?
I think it could be outgrid.
Okay, tell us about outgrid impatience. Why might we find it there?
Because you're doing things, you have a lot of knowledge, but it may not be going. It's kind of like the person who always has the plan and everything don't go according to plan, and when that something goes awry, they're just not willing to switch up to like get it done because that knowledge is so powerful to them. So anything outside of that, just like, nah, that's not it. And they grow impatient.
And so that impatience might feel, if I start at the center of the chain, I start to move out, I can certainly see that the intensity of my drive is increasing. And so I'm definitely starting to push the river, and I'm going to start to discover very quickly that you can't push the river. It's going to go as fast as the river goes. Now, if you replace the river with all the people around you that are supposed to be supporting you and helping you to accomplish whatever this task is that driver energy is so focused on, certainly impatience can come up. But am I impatient? Like upgrade, I was impatient, if you will, with either the situation or with myself because I lack the ability to do what needs to be done, or the situation was lacking in the resources to help it done. Does that feel, does the outgrade impatience feel and express itself in kind of a different sort of way?
Yes, I think it does. Yeah. I think if I step into the confessional, I spend a lot of time like I'm impatient a lot with things happening in a timely manner. Like
Okay.
I think it should happen. And so like these projects and things that I'm working on, and when they're just not going, we have the knowledge to do it, but it's just not going fast enough to my preference, I guess, and I get really impatient.
We impatient with.
Impatient that is just not is we have all these moving pieces that we studied, with a lot of intensity and with great depth, and they're
Mhm.
just not coming together in a
Oh,
timely manner.
okay. I heard you use the word we.
Yeah,
Is
so it's
that
kind of like it's a group of us, a group of physician researchers, and we've
mhm.
studied all this stuff and it's not coming together. And so some of them, have a different response than me. This is why I always tell myself that I would
Yes.
be a horrible leader in some aspects because I'll be on page 10 and wondering why everyone is still on page 2.
Yeah. See, now you're getting to where I was heading with my questions. I think people in the outgrid danger zone are likely to become impatient with others
Right,
Yeah,
right.
as
yeah.
as opposed to impatient with themselves or impatient with, even if they're impatient about resources, if they're outgrid, they're impatient about people doing what they needed to do to get those resources, because they know the outgrid
Yeah.
mindset says, look, we got everything we need. And it's very challenging. So people get your act together.
So see,
And
this
yeah.
is like the example that was running through my head was all of the work that so many people around the country are working on healthcare for everybody, while there's 90 million people that still need healthcare. And you're impatient. You're so,
Hmm.
so, so impatient trying to push the river to get somebody to do something about it, to see that what's necessary to do is absolutely out there and available.
And
So,
see, to me, what Linda's talking about is the big difference. Outgrid impatience includes the belief that all resources are available. So something about something else is slowing it down, and that something else is almost always other people.
right.
Where
Ah,
upgrid, the impatience is, I don't believe I have what I need. We don't have options. We don't have resources. We don't have it. And so to me, that's kind of a little different sort of a feeling. It's not directed so much towards other people as the outgrid frustration gets directed towards other people.
okay.
Can you guys feel
Yeah.
that difference? And again, remember, all
Yeah.
danger zones are neighbors. And so it starts to get a little bit muddy and cloudy when you're that far outgrid, because that far outgrid means you could, in an instant, also be that far upgrid or that far downgrid or wherever else you want to look at, because those are all the danger zones are neighbors of one another. So, so that's it. So these tend to be impatient with others. Now, why I'm bringing that up is because, again, like I said, I wanted to make this something that's practical for working with other people. Well, how often do you have people who are very focused on achieving a particular outcome, very driven to do something, but you're hearing this impatience, this frustration, this annoyance, anger, all those outgrid and some upgrid sorts of emotions being expressed, behaviors being exhibited. Am I right? You guys see a
Yes.
lot of outgrid people.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, T, here's a question. Would it be possible that if someone is really outgrid, 12 and 12 is what we see here, would it be also a reflection of a lack of empathy of people's ability, or their
Mm,
capacity, or even
yeah.
their experience?
Right. Remember, if we look at just these concentric circles, that in the inside of the green circle, people are able to um, achieve, manage, maintain perhaps an equal appreciation for things that are more about themselves, that concern themselves personally, things about others, and things that are just about information. So we talk about three different orientations. I can be self-oriented, I can be other-oriented, I can be information-oriented. Well, in the center of the change grid, we strike a balance, an appreciation for all three of those. They live in harmony. As we move between the green circle and the red circle, something falls by the wayside. And generally what falls by the wayside is, what do you think? Concern for self, concern for others, concern for information.
I would say
Mm.
others.
This is where a wonderful debate has happened now for years. Is it others or is it information? No one ever says self, which is what the real point is going to be as we get outside of the red circle. But some people say, well, depends on what direction we're going, because people that are moving up grid between the green and the red are starting to feel more out of control. They might be more concerned about others and less concerned about data, information, facts, etc. So they might shed the information orientation in favor of the individual orientation. Where if I'm moving down grid, we might observe that people become less interested in other people and they're hanging on to that appreciation for the data, the facts, the information orientation. And that shouldn't be surprising because downgrid is all about knowing something and boosting ability, etc. When we move in grid, the thought is that we're more likely to shed information because that whole in grid quality, that whole amiable energy implies a great level of concern for others. And so they'll set aside whatever information is in the way. If they have to give something up, they'll give the focus up on that rather than give up the focus on people. And if we start, pardon me, to start moving out grid, what do you think the driver energy is likely to give up on first? Data, information, etc., or people?
People.
People. In fact,
Really?
yeah, look, the amiable, or rather the analytical driver is completely, well, they're halfway out or more. They're hanging on to whatever information they've got, but they become less concerned about the people than they do. And then ultimately, when you're outside of the red circle, you can forget information, you can forget other people. What are people in the danger zones only concerned with? Self for different reasons, but nevertheless their concern is for themselves. And so there is this shedding of some orientation, and the thought is more often than not, as we're moving out grid, that ultimately driver, and again, let's just kind of characterize this with something we've all encountered. The bossiest of the bosses, the most entrepreneurially than entrepreneurs, the person who's completely focused on accomplishing the task, at a certain point, they take other people for granted. So when did that get shed, this concern for others? So if anything, they're more likely to hang on to a little bit of the data, a little bit more of the information, but ultimately all that's going to get tossed aside and it's just drive, 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 push, push, push.
Interesting. So may I ask
So,
a question?
yeah.
So where would you be if you're overly concerned about people?
Oh, that's going to move you what direction, everybody else? What do you think?
In grid.
That's going to move me more in grid. And if anything, by the way, the people who are in the in-grid danger zone, we talk about their self-orientation, it's because they've already been stripped of everything else. There's nothing left but themselves that far.
So I'll give you an example because like, you know, I have some family members that have some health issues. And so undoubtedly myself or one of my brothers who are also physicians often get a call. And so we talk to them and we're trying to figure out, okay, if you understand you have this ailment and you're like, you're experiencing it. So it's not like it's not doing something. You're experiencing some inflammation. And then they won't go follow up about it. And so then we keep getting the call. I get really heated having the same conversation more than 5 times. That absolutely drives me crazy. And
now you're talking about two very important things that are going to build on what we're talking about the impatience that occurs out grid, and that's also pulling us into the impatience that occurs down grid. So let's talk about the out grid one first. The frustration of this, or that we might as well use the impatience of the person who is in the outgrid danger zone tends to be directed towards other people, or tends to be about other people not doing their part. What's going on there has more to do with the threshold of activation than it does with anything else. Similarly, your situation with giving family members health advice that only to have them, pardon me, not follow through and take it is more about their threshold of activation than anything else. So You're at the threshold of activation. You took immediate definitive action. You shared the information. Or the person who's in the outgrid danger zone, who's running whatever the task focus happens to be, they're already at the threshold of activation. They're pushing, they're driving, but they're waiting for everybody else to hit their threshold. And those people just aren't there. So even when you're talking about being on this committee and waiting for others to supply you with information, what's stopping them from giving you the information or following through on their part of the task?
Yeah.
They're just not at the
Just not enough.
threshold of activation.
Yeah.
So we got to do something to raise their level of tension, even though that's what's going on. Now, I also mentioned that you're also tipping your toe a little bit into the downgrid impatience. People that are downgrid, I think, can be illustrated quite nicely with the image of a hibernating bear. So they're very comfortable where they are. They've got all the information they need. They're all set. Everything is just fine. So when you ask a hibernating bear to do something for you, what kind of a response are you likely to get?
Nothing.
Nothing. Or if you do bother them enough, what are they likely to do?
Might eat you.
They're going to be very grumbly. They may not have the energy.
Yes.
They might take a swipe at you or whatever the case may be. So now you apply that to telling someone the same thing over and over. The person who's this far downgrid already understands it's completely. There is no challenge in it. And they're just wondering, why does everybody else not get that? Why are we having the same discussion? Or why are we revisiting this?
Yeah.
Well, that's poking the bear. That's basically just going like, look, how many times do we have to go over something? Like, take a note, people, or whatever. And you also get into some personality issues there, because there are a lot of people who like to revisit topics because they do tend to be more social, more about operating as a collective. So to them, they're not talking about something again because they forgot something. They're talking about something again because they like that that involvement of others in it. Person I can't relate. I'm the bear. Don't poke me. That's where my impatience comes up with, because I'd like to know I've done something. I did it well. I only need to do it once. And this is why I would make a horrible manager. Horrible manager.
So is that the perfectionist kind of thing?
Well, it comes into that a little bit, but I'll share with you my greatest frustration as a speaker, or even as a trainer. I know my material is really good. I know that the day is going to go very well because it's been done so many times. I know how it's all going to unfold. And it's all been constructed to go very nicely. Those of you who are on the line who are teachers, or whether you're in front of an audience regular, you've actually done school teaching, etc. Okay, it's 5 minutes before the day begins, and all my head can think is, oh my God, I have to say all of this all over again. It's like, people, read the book, watch a video. But no, I actually have to recite 8 hours worth of material all over again. And so for me, I'm exhausted at the end of a training program, not because the audience exhausted me, but because I actually had to muster the energy to say it all over again. Can anybody relate to that, or is that just me? As a presenter, some of you like, okay, Edie, you're a CSP, so come on, you've delivered the exact same speech how many times? Don't you ever kind of feel like, oh my gosh, what can I do to make this more creative for my sake? Forget the audience.
I think it's a little bit different. I was thinking about that, doing a keynote, because it's more about just firing them up. You know what I mean? So it's not as much, okay, chapter 1, chapter 2. But the other thing is, I presented a lot of different programs, and I think that kept my sanity too.
Yeah. Well, I've delivered the exact same half-day program well over 1,000 times, virtually verbatim.
Wow. Yeah,
So,
T, I can relate. I taught probably in 13 years, 160 general psych classes and maybe 80 developmental. And I think to keep myself entertained, I try to bring new material, new studies,
Sure.
so I could learn. So I would always try to bring things that were new so I wouldn't get so bored.
Yeah. And this is why I'm sure for you, and similar for me, I rely very much on the audience to be interesting. Because if I've got to recite it and I've got an audience of people who really don't want to be there, and really are just going through the motions or whatever, it's kind of like, oh, this is going to be hell. I mean, I'll still, hey, we're in a performing art if you think about it. Yeah, we're in the business of edutainment. So I get it. Show must go on. Let's muster up the energy. Let's go ahead and do it. But I wonder how people on Broadway are able to do the exact same performance in the exact same way, and they don't have very much flexibility, if any at all, to do that. But that to me is this whole idea, if you are like me, that it's easy to be down grid, and I become very impatient with not so much sometimes with others, but usually it's what hole have I dug myself into? What rut have I actually built for what trap have I actually engineered for my own self? Anyway,
Interesting. I never even thought of impatience down grid. So this is interesting. I'm finding I'm learning a lot about myself in these virtues and
right.
sins
Well,
has been quite cathartic.
and why I wanted to bring this up was because the impatience that someone feels upgrid tends to be expressed outwardly. The impatience someone experiences outgrid tends to be expressed outwardly.
Really,
The
yeah.
impatience of downgrid, generally speaking, is whatever you see, whatever is demonstrated here is the tip of the iceberg about what the actual impatience is. So, and down here you get people sighing and huffing and puffing and, just sounds of exasperation, all that happens in that downgrade impatience. But the vast majority of it is kept internal.
So they'll hold it in and
They hold it
express.
because honestly, they just go like, it's just not worth the energy of expressing it. I just have to go with it. This is my hell. I have to endure whatever. And so that's that. That's why, again, I'm delivering the exact same speech that's virtually verbatim. If I wasn't well compensated for it, why am I doing it? Why am I, so yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Now, similarly, I guess, again, going back to making this practical, I do think we deal with a lot of people who are having outgrid impatience. And then, think about the kind of work you're doing with them, getting them to kind of appreciate other people's limitations, but they really also need to learn how to positively impact other people's levels of productive tension, because this requires leadership. If you're going to be that far out grid and you can't do it all by your little lonesome, then sorry, you have to become an effective leader if you really want to get these people on board to do what needs to be done the way it needs to be done in the time frame that it needs to be done. So that's just, your burden. I had an audience with my largest client. I'll allow to remain nameless for the sake of the recording, but nevertheless, doing a management training program, and one of the people said, it's kind of like when I move into management, they promote me into management, and suddenly they give me this monkey that's on my back. And I said, everyone who gets promoted to management is given a welcome gift, and the welcome gift is a monkey on your back. So these are the things that you've got to do. It's like, I don't know what you thought management was going to include, but management involves interacting with other people. And it's not just policing their behavior, and it's not just screaming at them. It's about really learning how to get the most out of people. That's how management evolves into leadership. So that's the burden there. Well, the burden downgrade is very different. So let me just throw it back to you guys. How many of you have got clients or are training people who will have clients or do have clients that are dealing with impatience expressed, whether it's, well, I'm more concerned about outgrid, downgrid, and even ingrid, because upgrid, there's something in the environment that needs to be changed. Again, they acknowledge they're missing something vital. And that's why they're impatient. So anything we can do to do an intervention or supply them with what they're lacking, that's a very different kind of a situation that's a little bit more, how do I say this, more transactional. Give them what they need and they're good to go. Where if I want to fix outgrid impatience and downgrid impatience, these are more transformational. I have to help this individual evolve if they're going to be able to be more successful in whatever it is they're doing with other people. Do you guys agree with that? What are your thoughts around what I've just said about transactional versus transformational? And
I think, T, that this would be very hard. And I know of individuals that I have interacted with who are 12 and 12 with most of their activities, and extremely difficult to work with them. And I know those that work with them, really were frustrated too.
yeah. Yeah. And how often did that person who's very far out grid actually engage our services to fix everybody else?
Yeah,
you know, but it's kind of like,
true.
well,
Yeah, true. Very true.
Interestingly enough, yeah. At a certain point, maybe what's that little meme say that at a certain point you realize that the only common variable in all of your failed attempts is you. So
Mm.
you got to take a look at you. So anyway, my point is that from a practical perspective, there is work to be done with people that are in the outgrid danger zone. And we're talking about patience as the virtue. So impatience as being the one, and downgrade impatience doesn't get all that much attention because it tends to be quiet. When it does express itself, you might suddenly see that expression become an outgrid expression of their impatience, but it's just because it's been stewing and simmering and all down here before it hit a boiling point. And again, the danger zones are all physically adjacent to one another, so moving from the downgrid danger zone to the outgrid danger zone is a very small step. Right, you guys all understand that concept? Yep. And
Yeah.
so that now we should just for the sake of balance talk briefly about the in-grid impatience. The in-grid impatience, again, we have to think about who this in-gridist of the in-grids is. This is the ultimate victim. This is the person with such tremendously low self-esteem, such a habit of being subordinated, demeaned, diminished, etc. Where it all came from, whether it came from outsiders, whether they're doing it to themselves, one way or another, they're here. Well, that impatience might not even be understood, experienced in a cognitive kind of way. The thought that it would ever be expressed, forget it. They might not even express it to themselves, but there is kind of an impatience that's going on there. And the reason I know there's impatience there is because when people break free of that victim reality, what's moving them forward, what's helping them to take that risk and step out there where they are more, I want to say, taking care of themselves, expressing themselves, being increasingly assertive or whatever, very gently initially, obviously, as we work our way across the continuum. But it is that impatience that I think is actually catalyzing it. I can't wait any longer. I can't keep living the way that I'm living. I can't keep allowing this to happen. Can you guys relate to that? Or yeah. Now, I don't know that there are clients. They might be Peter's client or Edie's client. You guys are psychologists, so maybe you'll deal with that. But there's a clinical issue going on. that probably needs to be addressed. There might even be legal issues that are going on. There might be criminal issues that are going on about the way they're behaved. So those people who help the people who've been held captive, I mean, literally held captive, that's a very different kind of work than the kinds of coaches and consultants and human development professionals that we tend to work with are going to encounter. Yeah.
T, where does passive aggressiveness come then? I mean, so
yeah,
would they're passive and then they become aggressive where they, go out grid, where they.
Well, it's still, that's an in-grid quality overall. Passive aggressive behavior tends to be an in-grid quality. Because again, passive this is the domain of passive. Okay. Passive aggressive is most effective when the aggressive part is unnoticed, when it can only be recognized by the person who perpetrated it and can just smile, a very quiet little smile to themselves and go. So it's even best when they're not even actively noticed, because again, their fear is that someone is going to realize that they did something and there will be a price to be paid for that. So they have ways of being passive aggressive, but I think more often than not is when the person who has been kept too far in grid for too long finally breaks free of that, or sees an opportunity, and they're not going to suddenly move to the middle of the change grid. Think about the stories we've read. Think about the studies that have been done about victim behavior post-victimization. What are they likely to do?
Go postal.
They go postal.
Yeah.
They go postal. They suddenly go very far out grid or very far up grid, very reactive. And so we see this explosive behavior. And you guys all know this, that very often the people who are out grid bullies were victims elsewhere, other times in life. And that this in-grid person, when they finally break free, may simply swing to the other extreme because those are the only other behavior set they've ever witnessed. Right?
Yeah.
They've never witnessed a loving, caring, supportive dynamic. So inside of their awareness, they only know what it's like to be a victim and what the behaviors are of a bully.
Yeah.
So that's why they swing. So yeah. So be careful. Any of you who've got a bullied kid or are working with people. In fact, Edie, you do a lot of work with kids. So
yeah, and I have a book on bullying. Stop bullying now.
And in it, do you talk about the dynamic that the bully is real? Bullying comes from insecurity, and sooner or later that insecure person may grow into a bully, and there's
I talk about 8 types of bullying, but what is not known in the past is that there's a new type of bully, and it's the arrogant bully because of the changes in our society. So it isn't so much what you're saying as much anymore, but also the arrogant bully.
Yeah. And so just for the fun of it, where do you guys think the arrogant bully would live on the change grid?
That's a good point.
Where do you think arrogant bullying, where might we encounter?
It's out grid.
It's out grid. They're arrogant about something.
Yeah, I would say that they're specialization leads to arrogance. So I would say in their mind, they're 12-12. They may not be, but in their mind, I think they're 12-12.
Right. So I would say to you that there is definitely an arrogant bullying that occurs out grid. There's also an arrogant bullying that occurs down grid. The difference is that I think out grid arrogance is about deeds and accomplishments, and down grid bullying is about intelligence and superiority. And the difference, to Peter's point, is that the person who's out grid and arrogant has accomplished great things against great odds. And the person who is the down grid arrogant bully sees no challenge anymore at all. They're the total master, or perceived master, obviously, of whatever it happens to be. So you walk into an academic environment, and I know, Peter, this is your reality. You operate in an academic environment. There's a lot of arrogance in an academic environment. Peter, am I right, or am I making stuff up?
Well, no, there's a lot of arrogance, and it makes for often toxic relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, once they're tenured, it might take on a whole new dimension.
Yeah.
Peter, are you in a community college or 4-year?
Well, I stopped. I did some adjunct work over at William Peace in Raleigh, but I stopped teaching. But I do some work over here at UN at some of the local places, UNC, Duke, and some other colleges. You know.
Okay, because I think there's a big difference between community and 4-year colleges
Yes.
in terms of that. Yeah, because I did work in a community college, and there I did not see that
Right, but
smirky arrogance.
what happens
Mhm.
if you get together with a whole group of educators, and in there you've got people that only uh, provide education to PhD candidates, only
Mhm.
education to
Mhm.
in a 4-year degree program, education in a 2-year program, and education as far as a trade goes. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know, these
Yeah.
are all highly specialized people who may not, you know, but you could just tell the arrogance is just going to be ever so present. And now take it out of that, put yourself into the Fortune 500, put all those CEOs together. What kind do you think you think? Are they all buddies?
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, no, they tolerate one another, but you know,
Hmm.
king of the
Do you
hill.
think that's
King of the hill.
happening? Do you think that's happening more today or less today than 20, 30 years ago?
Personally, I think it's happening more today
More.
because of the speed of information. I
Mm-hmm.
think that social media is making everybody far more aware of what everyone else
Mhm.
is doing at all times. So people are far more concerned about what their online image might be and how they're playing out in the media and all that. So I think it's actually getting worse, which in my opinion is what's also compelling the movement up the spiral dynamic. So we're getting more
Mhm.
and more people who are saying all of that believing your own PR, all that kind of um, trappings that come along with all that wealth becoming close to a trillionaire and all that. It's time for that
Mhm.
to all crumble and fall by the wayside because
Mhm.
that's not what humanity needs. That's not what humanity
Mhm.
is. And so I
Yeah.
think you're going to watch that.
Mhm.
You know.
I think it's really extreme even. There's like there's no balance in it because it's, you know, like you said,
Mhm.
the social media can really personify it with great you know, expediency.
Yeah.
So there's no balance. It's like you're either this or you're that, and it's the extreme.
Yep. Well, and even if you just go back within our own lifetimes, when you're thinking about top business leaders like Lee Iacocca, back when he took over Chrysler or whatever, I don't know what year that would have been, but that's at least a few decades ago. No one would have known anything about Lee Iacocca unless someone wrote an
Mhm.
article that was in print, or I know he had a
Mhm.
book that came out. There was no social media, nothing.
Mhm.
Well, today you can be the CEO of a brand new startup and suddenly have 1 million followers on Instagram or whatever.
Right.
I mean,
Mhm.
it's insane. So,
Mhm.
but we're also going to see a retaliation around that. Okay, so obviously the whole point of doing this revisit of impatience was I wanted to try to make this all very practical for you. And of those 7 heavenly virtues, I think that the ones we tend to need to work with are about patience,
Mm-hmm.
kindness, and maybe some humility. Now these all parallel. So wrath, the opposite would be patience. Envy would be kindness, and pride was humility.
Humility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so these are all going to go together. And the point of all this is that they live in a particular place on the change grid, but they lean a certain way. So when I think about patience at its essence, do you think patience is where? As far as this little chart is concerned, where would you say of the 4 main energies, driver, expressive, analytical, and amiable, which one is more inherently patient?
Amiable.
The
I would
amiable.
Amiable.
say amiable. Yeah.
Amiable. Now we know impatience occurs at all 4 extremes. So we know that as we move away from the extremes, we're getting closer and closer to patience. And so patience lives in the middle, but leaning towards the amiable qualities. Does that feel right to everybody?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
remember last time around, I also talked about diligence. Well, diligence certainly is in the middle, but leans what direction?
Downward.
Down.
Diligence. Tell me, describe diligence. Diligence. Go ahead, anybody.
Paying attention.
Paying
Yeah.
attention, yep.
In carrying on. Just
Carrying on. Mm-hmm. Sticking.
Conscientious.
Yep, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, conscientious.
Being very conscientious. But I'm diligent in what? I need to give me the rest of it. He's very diligent in what? Or very diligent when it comes to what?
usually
Or
an
we need to be more
analytical topic.
diligent about what?
It's usually about an expertise or a skill or an analytical topic.
Yeah, okay. And I'm thinking that we're seeing something analytical, but we're also hearing something that's about doing something. A little bit of a driver kind of energy. So we ultimately ended up with that it's in the center, but leaning halfway between driver and analytical, depending on the situation. So I'm very diligent about getting my taxes done. Well, yeah, I got to do the analytical part. I'm very diligent about winding the clock every day. I'm very diligent about, and so there's always this kind of like analytical element that could come into play, or driver, but in the exact center, nothing really happens in the exact center. So the point is, in order to experience some of these virtues, we have to lean a particular way. Now we have these two left, and those are kindness and humility. So if I said on the change grid, where do you think you're going to find someone who is most naturally kind? What energy resonates with kindness?
Would that be Ingrid?
I'm thinking that's an amiable quality
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
So now that would mean that as we move away from the center of the change grid, and again, we're saying kindness would be in the center, but leaning a little bit to the amiable side of things, not even this far, but leans a little bit. That would mean that as we move away from the center of the change grid, we're going to see kindness is going to change, perhaps move a bit to a less important thing. So would you describe a driven driver as particularly kind?
No.
No.
No, they're very task oriented. No, as an expressive, upgrade danger zone, kind.
No.
They seem a bit
No.
preoccupied with whatever's threatening them in that moment. Okay. The analytical, downgrade danger zone, are they kind?
No.
No.
No. And if I go amiable, kind, again, now we're talking about that trapped prisoner. I don't know, they're particularly kind because they're not really living. They're not really, interacting. They're not really whatever. So maybe if anything, it is that desire to be kind that moves them, or wanting to be treated kindly, that starts to move them outward a little bit. So cultivating kindness is about getting yourself to be more other oriented. That feel right?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so the last one then is humility. Well, do you expect a driven driver to be the poster child for humility?
No.
No, they're not very humble. They're not very humble, and they don't hesitate to tell you
Yeah, I was gonna say they don't care about that.
how great they are. If anything, they're going to blow their own horn really loud, and no one may want to hear it, but nevertheless, forget there's no humility that far outgrade at all. How about downgrade? Do you think we're going to find very humble people here? Humility, we were talking about arrogance earlier, arrogant bullying.
Yeah, you're gonna find conceit.
Not really.
Very conceited, but the analytical energy, is lacking in tension. It's lacking in energy. So they're not likely to volunteer it or, profess it or whatever. If you poke the bear, they're going to grumble about it. They might take a holier than thou sort of attitude, a know-it-all kind of a position around that. So there's no humility down here at all. But it's probably humility that is very focused on what they know. Where up here, it's that they're being braggadocious about everything they've accomplished or whatever. You find any humility upgrid? Upgrade danger zone, expecting people to be humble up there? I'm not expecting humility. Am I expecting arrogance? I don't think so. I think they're in a totally different kind of mind space.
Mhm.
I mean, how arrogant can you be when you're at the moment acknowledging that you have zero ability to do
And
something?
you don't even have mind space. There's zero
Right.
mind.
Then you're and you're
Right.
completely consumed by whatever it is that's threatening you. So that would seem to mean then that arrogance is tied to perceived ability.
Mhm.
As ability goes up, arrogance can go up. So as a perceived ability goes down, humility goes down. I can see that that might be a pattern. And certainly arrogance can express itself in different ways as we've described it. So I want to also throw out there that there could be another kind of humility we want to talk about. And that is the humility that comes from embarrassment and shame.
Can I
Yeah,
add
go ahead, please.
one thought? When I give 360 feedback to those driven drivers, I joke, but I like to say that humility is chemotherapy to the ego.
There you go.
Say that
Wow.
again, Peter. Say that again.
Humility is chemotherapy to the ego.
Ah,
Yeah,
Very nice.
that's very nice.
I like that.
When we're talking about the different energies, we even say for this outgrade danger zone is that this person is so forward facing, looking at and striving towards their goal, that what they sometimes need to do, this is one of the in-grid maneuvers, by the way, is to stop, turn around and look at all the people behind them that have supported them and enabled them to get to where they are. They did not get to where they are alone. And so stop for a moment, acknowledge and appreciate and recognize all those around you, because it isn't all about you. Well, that's kind of a little exercise that's also about humility, but I think there's a difference between humility as an exercise to correct arrogance versus humility as a natural state.
Mm-hmm.
Could you guys kind of relate to all that? I mean, humility as a natural state tends to be more in-grid, maybe even way in-grid if you're talking about humility to the extreme.
T, I think I like that humility is a natural state. And I guess, how would you say that maybe as we become more proficient or accomplished to be ever vigilant against the arrogance or the inflation?
Right. To always remember that the way I put it is that the center of the change grid is an experience that is being redefined every moment of every day as we evolve. So what we might have considered, in fact, it's true for everything on the change grid, what we might have considered an ability of 9, for that we possess ability of 9 at something, may at a certain point in time suddenly feel like an ability of 6 because we realize there's a lot more we didn't even know we didn't know. And so in the big scheme of things, we are always just on a journey. And I like to think this whole idea about finding the center of the change grid and living in the center of the change grid, to be there, you have to acknowledge that your ability is only a 6, no matter what the activity is. That there's always as much waiting to be discovered and learned than there is that you have already discovered and learned. The moment you don't think there's anything left to discover and learn, your perceived ability is going to start going up, 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 up. And there you're going to be. But the period of time where that would actually be valid is temporary. Sooner or later, if you're on a personal evolutionary path, you're going to realize you don't know anywhere near what you think you actually know. You don't, even people, and you guys can tell me this, well, you guys are all PhDs that are on the show. You've got the equivalent kind of thing. Did you, when you embarked upon your studies, did you even realize how much sheer volume of information there was available out there on this subject that you thought at some point you'd be able to master? No,
No,
Yeah.
no,
no.
no.
Yeah.
And the more you learn, the more you discover other works, other people, other insights, other theories, other whatever. All of us have only scratched the surface of anything that outsiders would say, well, you may view yourself as only scratching the surface, but we consider you to be a PhD in whatever that happens to be. I mean, how many people got
Yeah.
PhDs 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they go, based on what today's PhD candidate in the exact same subject would be expected to know, I don't know that I'd qualify,
Yeah.
right?
In fact, I remember studying the neuroscience. They will always say that it's call it the last frontier because it's always something developing. It's always
Yeah,
something new about it.
yeah. Yep. And I think that's true for every
Yeah.
aspect of whatever it is we happen to be looking at. Now, how did I get off on that? Oh, I wanted to get off on that just because I said that. So humility exists in the center, leaning slightly in grid, and humility can get greater and greater and greater as we move further in grid. And that's why, as my little closing thought for in this the subject here is that I wanted to remind everyone what I said at the beginning. And that is that while these may be the 7 heavenly virtues, once you apply them to the change grid and you start to really understand how this is affecting things as far as tension management, personal growth, and all that, you realize that some, if not all of these, taken to an extreme, becomes destructive in its own way. So
Mhm.
what happens if someone becomes so humble they end up being moved into the in-grid danger zone? Suddenly humility is no longer a useful thing for them. In fact, what would you be telling them to work on developing as if you were their coach or their therapist?
Yeah, assertiveness.
Some assertiveness,
Yeah.
take some pride. Come on, own your
Mhm.
your completeness. So own your success. Blow your horn gently and beautifully, but blow your own horn a little bit like that. So humility taken to an extreme is detrimental. If we looked at something like kindness, well, if you're going to be so kind to others, whether it's creatures, whether it's other humans, whether whatever, at what point might kindness actually end up becoming carry a
Self,
cost with it that is self-damaging,
yeah, self-sabotage. Yeah.
Yeah.
self-sabotaging, or whatever, putting
Maybe.
everyone else's needs before your own?
Hmm.
Yes.
And with humility to an extreme, T, I guess the word suicidal came to mind too, that you turn,
Yeah, well,
couldn't that
and even if we look at some religious orders, the more cloistered orders in the Catholic faith and all that, you certainly go like, well, at a certain point in time, your humility is so important to you that you realize you're never going to be able to achieve it. And so you have to work it even harder. So let's shave our heads, let's self-flagellate, let's, all these kinds of things that are all about um, removing from you any sense of, forget arrogance, any sense of value that you yourself can uniquely own. So there are cultures that do that. There are certain religious practices that do that. So my point is like diligence. Diligence can be a really, really negative thing if you are being hyper vigilant or hyper diligent about the wrong thing,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
we need to be diligent at the right times, in the right circumstances, to whatever degree it serves us. But too many charity
Mm.
taken to an extreme, temperance to an extreme, if chastity was taken to an extreme, humanity will vanish from the whole planet. I mean,
Exactly.
just, we need balance in these things. And unfortunately, in my readings about the 7 heavenly virtues, that balance is not discussed. It just
Mhm.
says, stop doing all of these things and focus entirely on doing more and more and more of these things. And we find it particularly interesting. Linda and I like period dramas, anything with fancy costumes or whatever. We like those kinds of stories. But you start to um, understand that the mores of the day were very much emphasizing, particularly for women, these ideas about chastity and temperance and charity. These, if you wanted to be a virtuous woman and therefore someone who in polite society would be viewed as a good candidate for marriage. I mean, how many, okay, right now it's the two of you, Edie and Kathy. Are you guys glad you were not born during that time period?
Delighted. I would not have worked well there.
I'm just saying. It
You
just
would
wouldn't.
reincarnate real quickly, huh?
Yeah, I'm just saying. It's kind of like, yeah, well,
That might drive me to suicide. Say,
I'm
give me
saying just to kind of go like, okay, redo, start over. Oh, yeah, I just can't imagine. But that was the reality. And the more virtuous you were, the more of a candidate you were for marriage. And then fine, you landed whoever this guy was. The marriage may very well have been totally arranged based entirely on practical, financial, social position sorts of things. So what was even the quality of the life that all this virtue brought you? Yeah, you had resources and you could wear nice outfits and live in nice houses and do nice travel, but woe be unto you if you broke even one slight little expectation. Suddenly you were cast aside, and women back in that time period had to relinquish all of their personal wealth, all of their personal possessions. Everything about them was gone. I don't understand why the women of the day didn't just kind of get together and get the vote and all that. I don't know why you just didn't wipe out the guys in one fell swoop.
I wonder
Yeah.
how many were closet alcoholics?
Oh, you got to believe it. And not only that, but back then, remember, opium was legal. And so there was all kinds of ways that the women could, find creative escape from all of that.
Well, remember Lizzie Borden?
Remember Lizzie Borden? Let's see, Brian, do you know that reference, Lizzie Borden?
No.
Lizzie Borden, there's a story around it, but there's a poem that goes with it. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, and when he saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Was that how it goes?
Yeah, that's
Lizzie Borden massacred her parents with a hatchet.
Wow.
Good old New England girl.
Yeah. Who just, well, obviously to go all that, did she have any pent up anger? I'm just saying. Sooner or later, something's going to break. And this whole idea but when you take a population, whatever that population may be, and you drill into them over perhaps generations, that these are what they must cultivate. These are what makes them a worthwhile, desirable human being. You've just moved them so far in grid. And of course, all of this is being done by two groups, men and churches.
Mm-hmm.
So, by the way, churches tend to be men. And so, because if I let women suddenly have what the same sorts of rights and privileges, I can't control them then. And society as we know it will fall apart. Well, luckily, society as they knew it fell apart.
This is interesting. So I wonder, and Peter probably can speak to this, this idea of being virtuous and work.
Yeah.
It seems like, like if you were a doctor, because like I was good at art and my father's just like, no, that's not something that you can make money at. So that kind of thing. And I think so many people have such a horrible relationship with this idea of work.
Yeah.
And we put down people who do like service work and that kind of thing. So if you're a professional, you have to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, those kinds of things. There's still school that sell that dream, so to speak.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, even charity and diligence did both include in their definitions this idea about doing the work for the work's sake, that to work is inherently good. And so I think that was kind of developing it because they, again, I think one of these was trying to combat sloth. So sloth is the fourth one down. So diligence was the counterbalance for sloth. So
You know, T, I think what you were saying, maybe to kind of wrap it, is that our virtues can become our vices if they're overused.
yes, that's a good way to put it.
A vir-
Absolutely.
Our virtues can become, what was that, Peter?
Our vices if they're overused.
Oh, yeah. Any extreme goes, it's cyclical. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
any normal desirable behavior taken to the extreme becomes its own form of addiction. So
Mhm.
can people become addicted to charity? Can they become addicted to patience and kindness and humility? Well, they could. And so that's why I just wanted to put out there that while these are all very nice virtues, society and history has already shown us what happens when you take these virtues to an extreme. You end up imprisoning an entire gender. And I wonder if we could say the same thing. The virtues might have changed now that life has evolved or whatever, but what are today's modern virtues? And what might those virtues be entrapping? Or who might those virtues be entrapping? I'll give you one example of this going back to someone was talking about appreciating work or the trades or whatever. For a very long time, the world has been sold on this idea that a four-year college degree is absolutely mandatory
Right.
for someone to
Right.
have something. They forget that universities, first and foremost, are not places of learning, they are businesses. And they are in the business of selling you on the fact that a degree is going to make a real difference. And I'm not suggesting that education is not inherently good, but that is a virtue. To be educated is now a modern virtue.
Yeah.
You know, or to appreciate education, celebrate education, that's a virtue. Another virtue we might have today is about being self-sufficient, self-reliant. We can take care of ourselves. We don't need anybody's help. We don't do anything like that. I've got to believe there's a whole set of modern virtues that we could go digging for. And those virtues are going to do the same thing that these virtues did. They're going to put a certain population on a much higher pedestal and another part of the population in an inferior position. Because if
Yeah.
you don't have the education, and if you aren't being self-sufficient, and if you this, and this, then now you are the modern equivalent of the women of the 18th century and early 19th century, or rather late 19th and early 20th centuries. Oh, and who knows, further back, I'm sure, long ago. It was just worse then. So there you go. All right, thoughts about that?
Yeah. So if balance is the key to all of this, where does we always talk about the center of the ChangeGrid and this power of the power of detachment. Where
Yeah.
does that play into
Well, remember
this?
that the exact center of the ChangeGrid is a fleeting experience. So we all want to go there. We all want to have that one little moment of Zen where we are completely detached from everything. If anything, we even at that moment escape our physical confines of our own body and we exist as nothing but a spirit, a consciousness, fully observant of all that's going on around it, but we are in that moment, not really there, if you will. We've kind of astrally projected ourselves outside of that without it getting too metaphysical. Obviously, that's a fleeting moment. So the moment you're back in your body and you're back in your life, well, we're just going to be leaning one way or another ever so slightly to get things done. And that's why I say inside of this green circle is where you're very likely to find all the positive expressions of those virtues. and the whatever else the opposites of those sins happen to be. This is where it's all very workable and serving you well and all very nicely adjusted. To me, you're still centered on the change grid anytime you're inside of this green circle. So are there variations? Yeah, but they're not profound. They're nice there. You step between the green and the red circles, and now we've got things to that are requiring a bit more of an energy. So maybe a little bit more of a driver energy or an expressive energy, an amiable energy, an analytical energy in order to accomplish whatever that task is. And we're working on those tasks, by the way, to help us improve whatever our inside the green circle life is like. So this is where we all really want to be. But in order to be inside of the green circle, we got to get out there and do some stuff. But we don't want to get into any of these danger zones where we really are totally out of balance.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. This is
So,
really good.
yeah, and so
know,
that's what, we're doing more and more work on the oracle, the self, and because it's not been our focus as far as our thoughts over all these years, our primary work is about tension management in terms of helping people move downgrid and outgrid or upgrid and outgrid. Our destination for our clients has always been outgrid because they were businesses. They were trying to do something. Well, when you say now, no, I'd like our target population to be individuals. And individuals, to help them most, we need to help them get to the center of the change grid, inside of this green circle, find that balance, that harmony, the peace, all those good sorts of things that come there. And at the same time, we have to let them know that there are times when you're going to have to step outside of that green circle to get certain things in life taken care of. But it's all.
Yeah, I think this is going to be more important now than ever, especially like even post-pandemic. The public health, I think it was National Institute of Health or CDC, one of them just said that for millennials, the anxiety is like off the charts right now.
Yeah. A
you know
lot's
what
happening there.
is all extremism really an attempt to regain control? I'm just thinking, I used to work a lot with eating disorders. And, the more they attempted to be in control by starving themselves, the more they were out of control to the point where they, actually were brain dead. But is that true almost?
I think what you're describing, Brian will be able to reinforce very well here. When you get to any of these extreme imbalances, you are now being ruled by dopamine.
Exactly.
Okay.
And all dopamine wants is more dopamine. So whatever that addictive behavior is, that extreme thought, belief, behavior, whatever it is, it's going to be reinforced because of the dopamine.
And so you get so caught up in whatever that relationship you have with that thing or person is, that there's no balance in terms of, okay, why am I actually doing this? Why do I actually believe this? That would be the serotonin that pulls you back in.
And that's why, if we want to fix society, everyone needs to be put on some SSRI.
Yeah, they need some oxytocin.
I'm saying we need the good neurochemicals to bring us back here, because think about that. Going back to neurotransmitters, outgrid is dopamine plus endorphins plus adrenaline. Is it any surprise that this tends to express itself in a very aggressive way?
Right.
Where downgrid, we've got dopamine, but no endorphins, no adrenaline, nothing like that at all. So this tends to be far more lazy, but lazy itself becomes a bit of an addiction. This is the couch potato. It's still dopamine going on there. We can work our way around that, but that's it. We don't, Brian will tell us, dopamine is something that is available to a human because under certain circumstances, it is ideal.
Yeah.
But we live in circumstances that are triggering dopamine beyond what dopamine was probably ever conceived of to serve us well. Does that make sense, Brian? So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I need a little bit of dopamine to get me moving, but I don't need to live in these dopamine extremes.
And that goes back to the balance that you were just talking about. Like, when is enough enough? To get out of the project, whatever it is that you're doing, then you can say, okay, let me reflect.
And
you
I would
know?
say to you that
Mhm.
dopamine is not a very self-aware, is not a neurotransmitter that supports self-awareness.
No,
No, because
Mhm.
it's
that's
not, I
what,
mean,
that's that
and
detachment.
yeah, this is it. This is
Mm.
it. So yeah, it's fun that everything comes
That's
full circle.
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, we
I
are
got
all
a call
slaves to
from
dopamine right now.
this is interesting. I got a call from a pilot who has a drinking problem. That's a little scary if he's flying,
Yeah.
big planes for American. And so he said he's slipping, he doesn't play the tape. But then he said, well, we'll just leave it open, just talking to you. It's almost like just talking to me and connecting to know I'm there made him feel better. So is that a chemical release too? Because it was
Yeah.
like,
That's oxytocin.
That's
But remember,
oxytocin.
oxytocin wants connection. That's what we're missing. And a
interesting,
real, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
interesting.
That's why even
Serotonin.
now when babies are born, they tell the father to
Mm,
take off his shirt and let the baby feel that contact with the skin. That's
That's right.
oxytocin, that connection.
Yep.
mm,
Peter, what were you about to say?
And wouldn't you say serotonin as well when we have a
Absolutely.
connection with
Absolutely.
someone?
Yeah, the
Yes.
internal, these
mm,
are, Linda could tell us if you're, oh, she's not on the call anymore, but she's going through a training that's all about being able to, I don't know, trigger's the right word, but to summon certain neurotransmitters, dopamine, oxytocin,
mm,
serotonin, and E. It spells dose. Dopamine, no,
mm,
yeah, it's not dopamine.
The
I forget.
EDSO, the
Hmm?
EDSO, EDSO. I
mm,
th- the
Yeah,
so
what's that? Yeah,
I think I
mm.
seen what's the guru's name, speaking guru. He
right.
came up with the endorphins, the
Yeah,
dopamine,
dopamine, serotonin, and
serotonin,
oxytocin.
and oxytocin. Yeah, he used EDSO as an acronym.
Those are the ones that we want. And I was always surprised when I saw dopamine being one of them because dopamine tends to be more problematic as we,
It's just that it's forward facing, like it tends to focus on something external, whereas like what Peter was just describing, you focus internally. So that's why it always draws you back in. So we
yeah,
use
yeah.
dopamine to
Hmm.
talk about some kind of external reward oftentimes.
Hmm.
Hmm.
There's dopamine is not available in a tablet form, is it?
Not that I know of.
Well, because I know that you could take a lot of drugs that will trigger dopamine, but dopamine doesn't come.
Right.
Where I know none of them, maybe they do. Adrenaline is certainly available as a,
Yeah, adrenaline is the gamma, the
Really?
GABA.
yeah, something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they can give you a shot of adrenaline. That's what an EpiPen is. So
Hmm.
yeah, but they can't give you a shot of serotonin. All they can do is help you get your serotonin to hang on a little bit longer before it gets released from the nerve ending.
Right. And see, those are more natural kinds of things. That's why I like this conversation when you say like these
Hmm.
natural behaviors, because that kind of balance is uniquely different than just like forcing your way or hacking your way to it.
That's right. Well, and I'll tell you this dose thing that Linda
Hmm.
does. It's all about. They'll tell you the one thing everybody should do every day is dance. So if you just get in motion and you're just dancing, listen to some good music, it's amazing how quickly you can end up with a nice bowl of neurochemical soup.
Hmm.
So,
You know what? My parents dance 3 to 4 polka waltzes, Wisconsin, 3 to 4 times a week. They
yeah,
had dance halls every night, and I call it happy music. I never
yeah,
saw anybody without a smile there,
no,
ever,
because it
ever.
releases endorphins. Exercise releases endorphins.
Yep.
And
Interesting.
you've got that, and it's a connection. It's a connecting activity, so that's stimulating oxytocin.
Hmm.
So good things are happening. Yeah. Okay. Anywho, we've gone way over time, but it's been a lovely conversation. So
Could Linda give us a brief summary in one of the talks of what
yeah,
she's learning?
absolutely. She'll tell you all about DOSE. It's an international movement, and
Really?
she
Hmm.
yeah. There's like every Saturday there's a gigantic webinar dance party that
Hmm.
Linda goes to that has quite literally hundreds of thousands of people on it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's phenomenal what they've been
Wow.
doing, but yeah, that's all I know about it. Let's see if I can tell you one thing real quick. Let me see if I can open it up.
Oh.
You guys can look online. It's called Daybreaker.
TYMZP. What is it
Yeah,
called?
Daybreaker. If you guys go online and do a search for Daybreaker Live, you'll probably see a little bit of, because I think Daybreaker Live is free. But oh my gosh, it's hours long and the energy level is mind boggling. It's too much for me. I consider it so over the top, it makes me nervous.
I was wondering why you're not on it.
No, no, because I can only handle so much hype before some other part of my brain comes along and kind of goes like, yeah. So,
Don't drink the Kool-Aid. I can
I
hear
don't
you
drink the
say it.
Kool-Aid, but it's really all about Kool-Aid drinkers, and that's okay because it's legit. I mean, obviously, it works. It's just not my thing. My thing is yoga. I want yoga, and
Yeah, that's peaceful.
okay, so just so you guys know, next I'm having my second vaccine on Saturday. And so I'm hoping I don't have any side effects. And I'm hoping if I do have any tiredness or anything, that it's gone by Tuesday. But I'm going to proceed as though Tuesday morning is going to be just fine. And I'll come up with a topic next. Maybe I'll let Linda tell us all about dose if I'm not feeling quite up to it yet. Maybe she can do a little bit on dose for you guys. And Brian, you said the other name for it isn't dose, it's ESOD or something?
Edso?
Edso.
The guy that wrote the book Start With Why. What's his name?
Oh, yeah. I forget.
That
Makes you
guru
wonder why
guy?
I didn't rearrange the letters to spell a word. So
Yeah,
that's all I did.
so he did a whole, I think not a TED talk, but he has on YouTube Edso that he's talking about. He's codified a way that people can lead people through neurotransmitters, and he had Edso.
Interesting. I have to look it up now. There is a TED talk on it. Simon Sinek.
Yeah, that's his name.
Simon Sinek, Getting to Why. Yeah, there you go. If I'm doing a TED talk, I'm not wearing an open collared plaid shirt. Just saying. Okay. All right, there you go. All right, good talking to everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. It's Easter weekend. Have a wonderful Easter.
Yeah,
If that's your thing.
happy
Easter, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
All right, bye for
Bye.
now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.